On today's Palace of Pistons podcast, the NBA draft is just a week away, and the Detroit Pistons have the 37th pick in the draft. What will they do at 37? Who should they target? Also, is there more pressure on the Pistons to make a move now after the Orlando Magic acquired Desmond Bane from the Memphis Grizzlies? All of that and more on this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast. Let's do it.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing.
Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
Pistons fans, welcome back to the Palace Pistons Podcast, part of the Believe Network. I'm your host, Mike Anguilano. Joining me this week is the full cast of characters, Jaren Jackson and Jasper Apollonia. Fellas, how are we doing?
Doing well. We were sitting here, and it's weird because this year we're sitting here and we're like, holy crap, the NBA draft is in a week. And for the past, whatever it's been, 3, 4, 5 years, every podcast from maybe February to June at some capacity had something to do with the NBA draft because the Pistons were always like within the realm of picking in the top 5. So it's weird, but we're going to talk a little bit about the draft today. We're going to talk about a few other things. I'm doing well. We're recording a little bit earlier than usual. I was able to get out and golf today. So I'm good to go. I'm ready for this.
Yeah, it's the rare year where if the Pistons get the number 5 overall pick, that means something's actually gone well. As it was, that means they actually traded up or something. Actually, please don't do that, Trajan. Please don't do that. Hey, look, Pistons fans, Detroit fans, we were robbed of a Paul Skeens, Tariq Skubal matchup today, unfortunately, which is very sad, but we are not going to rob you of another edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast. We did that for too long. So yeah, it's great to be here with you guys. And we hopped on here and I realized we were talking about the draft. And so I had to come up with my stone cold lock, my extremely strong opinion on who the Pistons are going to select at 37 overall in about 35 seconds. So that should tell you the level of preparation we're putting in. But you know what? The fact of the matter is the most successful NBA podcaster in the world is Bill Simmons. And that guy gave Amen Thompson his one of one unicorn award this year. So I feel like I'm flying with the angels right now. I'm doing what the real pros do. You might see me playing solitaire on my phone halfway through this thing. I don't know.
And then get angry at everybody when they see you playing solitaire. Aaron, it looks like you're recording from a shed. Where are you?
I'm in it's a cedar closet. This is
that's it. Okay. Yeah.
For years.
I don't know. It feels like an unrendered scene in GTA 2, like the top-down GTA.
It's an old storage closet that turned into my workspace. So
okay.
Aaron's home is constructed entirely by Minecraft blocks. So
that might be looks like.
Yeah, that might be what you're seeing there.
He just crafted a chest.
Yeah.
And he's living in it apparently. Okay. Anyway, pre-show plugs. This show is of course sponsored by the Palace Pistons Substack once again. We have not had much written content of late, have we?
Yeah, Mike kind of got a little overpromised last week.
Yes, I did.
Back with the writing too. It's always under promise, over deliver. Mike did it backwards.
I did it backwards. Yeah.
Well, see, I am going to try to write something for Wednesday, the day before the NBA draft, with just some stuff on some second round prospects that I think the Pistons could consider at 37. That's where they're currently slotted to pick. But I'm going to say that's a maybe. I'm not going to say that's for sure happening. Life's a little hectic. Life's a little busy right now. So I don't want to overpromise.
I apparently have no problem overpromising. I did get a new job, so I did have life come at me quite quickly the last couple of days. Yeah, it came very fast. They actually gave me the offer on Friday, which is why I no longer had as much time on the weekend to write about the NBA and to write about the Pistons. But Monday, I will aim to have something out. I won't say we will have something out. I'll aim to have something out.
Don't get your hopes up, people.
I don't have as much on my plate right now in my personal life. So, again, that's not a promise. We're going to aim for it. Jasper's rolling his eyes so far back. He's looking at his sports pennants behind him, a Yankees sports pennant. But yes, this show is sponsored by the Palace Pistons Substack. If you have not subscribed to us on Substack, please take a moment or two to do that. It takes a couple seconds. We really appreciate it. Even with us not having as much written content coming out as of late, we've still had people subscribing. I still get those notifications of people subscribing. So imagine what it'll be like when I do actually deliver and have something written, and we actually have something to talk about that's not who the Pistons could draft in the middle of the first or in the middle of the second round, rather. But please take a minute or two, a second or two, and subscribe. The link should be in the show notes wherever you get your podcast or in the description on YouTube if you watch our show on YouTube. Either way, we would really appreciate the support. So as we said, the draft is in less than a week at this point, which is mind-boggling. I feel like it just appeared. It's just all of a sudden here. We do have a couple of topics that aren't draft related. Dealer's choice. Do you guys want to talk about the draft first, since we've mentioned it about 8 times, or would you want to talk about some of the fallout potentially from the Desmond Bane trade or from the New Orleans Pelicans getting another first-round pick and look like they're gearing up for something? Which would you rather do?
Oh God, dealer's choice. Mike, take over. You're the host. You lead the way.
Okay. We're going to talk about the draft first, since it's fresh in Jasper's mind.
God.
It's fresh in Jasper's mind. I don't want him to lose all 35 seconds worth of research. So we're going to go with the draft first. Trading into the first round. It's something that we've talked about the Pistons doing in the past because they just needed more bullets in the chamber, more decent players on the roster. But this is a different era. The Pistons are a team that's looking to be top 5 in the East, top 4 in the East or higher. Do we think the Pistons should be a team that should be angling to trade into the first round? Should they still be in that asset gathering stage, or should they just be holding with where they're at pick 37?
Yeah, for me, I think when I look at the Pistons roster, and for years it was about, hey, can you get draft picks? Can you get young guys? Can you get prospects? And can you develop them? And I agree when you say that they're kind of in a different era now. And we saw for years, okay, you can have a collection of young pieces, but eventually you have to surround them with some older guys, with some veterans, with some NBA proven talent. And obviously last year, or this year, I guess technically still, we have seen what happens when they actually did that. And so now when I look at the roster, and I still see a ton of youth. I mean, even your top guy in Cade Cunningham is still incredibly young. He's 23 years old. But you go down the list between Asar Thompson, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, Marcus Sasser, Ron Holland. You go even to the bottom tier guys of the roster. There's Bobby Klitman. There's Danis Jenkins. Like, there is a lot of youth on this team already. And so for me, when I look at the roster, I'm not looking at it saying the Pistons need to get into the first round to draft a freshman out of college. I just don't think that should be a priority for them. I think there's a chance for Detroit with where they're at in the second round. They have a pretty early pick in the second round. I think there's going to be an opportunity for them to get one of those older guys that had a lot of production at the college level and have some skills that should translate to the next level that could potentially play minutes for Detroit next year if needed, and if there were injuries or whatever the case might be. And that's where I think the focus should be for Detroit. I don't think there's a need to trade up into the lottery or right outside the lottery. That being said, if the Pistons really like a guy that's kind of in between the end of the first and early second, and they feel like that guy's going to fall off the board 2, 3, 4, 5 picks before them, and when that kind of happens at that area of the draft that they're at, the price to move up is usually conditional second round picks down the line and cash and objects like that. We're not talking about real first round pick capital or young player capital that's currently on the roster. that's a different story. And if they did that and they ended up picking at 29 or 30, fine, because they found a guy that they really like and they believe in. But I don't think the Pistons are in a spot where they need to be looking at trying to break towards the lottery or the mid-level of the first round. I think they're beyond that in terms of where they're at roster building wise.
Yeah, I mean, look, they have young guys on the roster already that are in a position to fight for more playing time, that need more, need more of an opportunity. I just don't think they're in a place right now where it would make sense to trade into the lottery or anything like that. Like Aaron said, if you trade into the first round because you like somebody as perhaps like backup, third string guy, hey, there's some upside here, we can see maybe they fit a role. Sure, fine. It's probably not going to cost you all that much because, as we were discussing before, this is not an especially strong draft. Even like late lottery, we were talking about Danny Wolf. Danny Wolf is going to go probably somewhere between pick 15 and pick 25. And I don't really know what Danny Wolf is as an NBA player outside of, what he looks like on the stat sheet, to be honest with you. Like, that's the kind of player he is. There's just not a whole ton of like really high upside or even really high floor guys in that back half of the first round. But like Aaron said, I think there are guys in the second round, especially where the Pistons are going to be picking, who are actually there to fit a role and could contribute. Somebody that I have been really, really looking at for a long time now. Chaz Lanier from Tennessee, and I'm stealing Aaron's, but he really is the guy that I would like at that position as like a Marcus Sasser replacement, like a high volume shooting guard who can score from outside. But the difference is he's 6'4", and Marcus Sasser is, I'll be generous and say, a couple inches taller than I am at 5'10", but I don't know. Like I said, I think I'm being generous there. So, I think that's kind of where you're trying to make a move in the second round and who you're trying to draft. You're trying to draft somebody that's going to fit onto the periphery of your roster, who could potentially be a break in case of emergency type guy. Maybe they play a little in the G League. Maybe they turn out to be something more than what you're drafting them for. But I really do think that this is kind of a pick of need and convenience more so that, it's a pick more of convenience than it is a pick of need. And that's a good thing for the Pistons to be in this kind of position. Like, if the thing that you're looking at in the draft is, okay, how can we upgrade our fourth guard position, our fifth guard position? I think that's a really, really good place to be, considering where you were going into last year's draft with the number 5 overall pick and saying, what the hell do we do? Like, there's so many spots that need to be filled. You just got to take the highest upside guy. I think this is one of the rare situations where you can go, what fits with our roster? Because they don't need a huge influx of talent from the youth pool, and they don't need to take a big swing. So, yeah, I think it's a good position for the Pistons to be in.
So, you had mentioned guards. Is there a position specifically that you feel is an area that they should be targeting in the draft? Because I think point guard is kind of tough when I think this team really became a lot better when they had a veteran that could come in and provide veteran level minutes. Is a backup point guard like a Tyrese Proctor an area where they should be looking at a wing like a Johnny Broome? Or
well, that's why I'm looking at Lanier, because I think backup shooting, like backup shooting guard.
He's a 2 guard.
Yeah, he's a true 2, and I think that is actually like a position of weakness for them, both in terms of like veterans and in terms of young guys. Like, really, like, school's still out on Jaden Ivey. I'm sorry, it is. Like, we don't exactly know what he's going to be long term, and we saw last year, like, they had to go after Dennis Schroeder at the deadline, not just because they needed playmaking, but because like they needed somebody who could play off ball as well. And I think somebody like Lanier really, really fits that. Because I don't trust Marcus Sasser, unfortunately, just because of his physical limitations. Like, I thought he did some better stuff last year, like especially after Ivy went down before they acquired Schroeder. He had some good games. Like, he showed some flashes, a little bit more aggressiveness. That was all good, but he's not consistent enough from outside for me. And he's not big enough. So, like, I think if you could just get somebody like Lanier, who's 6'4" and a solid shooter, that's fine. Like, that's something that I think you kind of need on this roster. So that's where I'd like to see them go.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with the idea of going for that 2-3 wing type of player. Chaz Lanier was a guy that stood out to me. Really, I'm looking at guys that I know are going to be able to shoot the ball at the NBA level. So Chaz Lanier, Kobe Brea, John Tonje, like those guys that have consistent shooting numbers, were productive at the scoring level, at the 3-point shooting level in college. Those are guys that I think stand out to me. I will say that I do like the idea of someone like Tyrese Proctor. He's 6'5", 6'6", so there's a potential that he could kind of play alongside Cade Cunningham or play alongside another point guard if they want him to. But he shoots the ball very well. He's also wasn't like a super great point guard in college in terms of like distributing and assist, like his assist to turnover ratio wasn't great. So I don't know if like that's still something he's going to improve at the NBA level to the point where he's going to be a full-time point guard. He may end up becoming more of an off-ball guard. But when I look at Detroit's roster and I try to look at what might happen this offseason, if they do lose Dennis Schroeder, not to say they won't be able to replace him with another veteran guard, but they may want to get another point guard type of player in the system, because we know from last year that unless there's a big jump that Marcus Sasser is going to make, he's better in a lineup where he's also playing alongside another point guard. So whether it's Tyrese Proctor, whether it's Javon Small, I think they should maybe consider another point guard just from the fact that they might need it. And even if they do bring in a veteran point guard, whether they retain Dennis Schroeder or they bring in someone else, they still might need a third point guard on the roster in break glass case of emergency type situations. But if they don't, I like the idea of going with someone that's 6'5", 6'6", 6'7". You could theoretically put him on the court as a wing, and he's going to be able to space the floor for you. I don't think they need to go after a big man like Janai Broom. I don't see the need with the roster that they have right now to chase it big. I was surprised to see Vlad Golden's projected to get drafted. I didn't realize that. As someone that watched a lot of Michigan basketball, I didn't know he was considered an NBA type of center, but the league has changed a little bit and some of those taller guys are getting more looks now. So, but point being, I don't think they need to go after a big with the roster that they have, the centers that they have, and maybe another big that could be coming to the roster, which is something that we're going to be talking about later on the show. So yeah, wings or a point guard are kind of the areas that I'm looking at for Detroit in the draft.
I want to quickly throw one more name out there that I don't think we mentioned. If you did want to go after more of like a true combo guard, not a shooting guard, not a point guard, but like somebody right in the middle, I think Cam Jones out of Marquette is another interesting name right there. He didn't shoot well from three this last year. I think he's at like 31, 32%. But for the rest of his college career, he shot pretty good from outside on decent volume. He averaged like 6 assists per game. Like, he's a guy who can create a little bit for other people as well. Again, not like some super duper high upside player there, in my opinion, but like, I watched him play. I liked a little of what I saw out of Cam Jones, and that's another guy that I could see them like at 6'5". That would be another appealing target for me. I could live with that.
Yeah, his shooting fell off between his junior and his senior season. He shot 31% from three.
Yeah,
but something that is of note as well, as we've listed off prospects, all of the players that have been mentioned except for Tyrese Proctor were seniors. So they're older, and even Tyrese Proctor was a junior. So is that something that matters, an age thing? Would you rather take a swing on a young guy with more upside, or would you rather look for a more seasoned college player that has 4 years, 3 years under their belt that could maybe, because like Chaz Lanier is a couple months younger than Marcus Sasser. He'll be 24 during his rookie season. Does that matter at all in the process?
you don't have the playing time. Oh, sorry, Aaron. Sorry.
I was just gonna say it's not for where the Pistons are drafting and not for where the Pistons are at in terms of where this group is at in terms of trying to compete. Like they're not a lottery team. They are a playoff team. So it's like if you're a lottery team and you want to take a random freshman that wasn't a first round talent and you want to see if you're going to develop him for the next couple of years, that's one thing. But where they're at, they're a playoff team. They've got to try to find any way to get better. And how teams get better is building around the margins. So if they can find a guy at 37 that can come in and can contribute during the season at some point because he has a couple NBA ready skills, that's more valuable to me than taking a shot on a freshman.
Yeah, I mean, if you're taking a high upside swing on a young guy and he actually gets the minutes, like extended minutes, in order to show off what he's got, that means actually your season's gone really badly and something's gone like pretty terribly wrong. So I would say for me, I want a guy exactly like Aaron said, NBA proven skill set, somebody that if there's a break glass in case of emergency situation that you can throw in there and that will at least on some level have an NBA skill that can keep you afloat at whatever position you're hurting at. But like, there isn't the playing time for a young guy right now. Like, frankly, like where are they going to find the playing time for Ron Holland this year? Like that's going to be a difficult thing considering that they're going to need to make roster improvements as well. So like, I think there's other young players already with higher upside than whoever you're going to be getting at that point in the draft that are in line for opportunities before that person even would be. So no, I'm totally cool with going after a senior, an older guy. I'm not expecting this to be somebody that I need to develop into a high level long-term contributor for my team. It's somebody that I'm looking to fill a role.
Right. I figured as much. Just wanted to throw it out there since some people, anytime you look at a mock draft, one of the weaknesses or downsides of any player is their age. But I think in the Pistons case, again, this is a different era of the Pistons. They need to be looking for guys who can fill a role relatively soon, maybe not plug and play. There's not a whole lot of plug and play guys you get out of the NBA at pick 37. But yeah, I'm fine with looking at a senior, looking at a junior. I think that's probably where most of those players fall anyway, is between pick 28 and towards the end of the draft anyway. But you talked about roster building. You talked about Ron Holland. I think that's a good segue into the potential to trade for a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr. or Trey Murphy, which has been making some noise on the NBA, I don't know, airwaves, I guess, because both of those teams recently made trades. One of which we're going to talk about a little bit more in depth later, but the Memphis Grizzlies traded Desmond Bane to the Orlando Magic for a haul of draft picks, as well as Kentavious Caldwell-Pope going back to Memphis and Cole Anthony also going back to Memphis. And then the New Orleans Pelicans essentially swapped. It was kind of a rare, this team is still in the finals but making trades sort of deal where the Pelicans picked up an extra first-round pick and the Pacers get their pick back for next year. Is that correct? Don't remember the exact. I think the Pacers picked up their pick back.
Yeah,
they gave up
Pelicans got like the 23rd pick, and they gave up Indiana's first for next year, which they owned.
Right. So it seems like the Pelicans are doing something. They have new leadership there, but that, of course, has now opened up the door to, are the Grizzlies going to, soft sell? Maybe trade Ja Morant. That's not going to happen. Maybe trade Jaren Jackson Jr. I don't think it's going to happen. I think they probably wanted to move Bane to pay Jaren Jackson Jr. more money. But, this is the NBA. Luka Doncic got traded. There's no telling what could happen. So,
by the way, Mike, what an incredible coincidence that Luka got traded to the Lakers in the middle of the night with nobody else knowing. 4 months before the Buss family decides to sell the team. What a shocking coincidence that is. What a weird thing.
Stunning.
I wonder if that has any sort of impact on the value of their franchise. I can't imagine.
Can't imagine that the most the most notorious sports team in probably the world, maybe the world. I mean, there's some soccer teams in England that would probably beg to differ, but the Los Angeles Lakers and the Celtics both getting sold within a year of each other is kind of odd. Maybe if we have time, we could talk about that as well. But Yeah, Jaren Jackson Jr. and Trey Murphy, two names that have popped up as potential guys that the Pistons could acquire. There's a little more smoke on Murphy, I think, but if you were to acquire, let's start with Jaren Jackson Jr., who's a defensive player of the year caliber player, 3-point shooter, fits super well with Memphis. Not as likely, I think they can acquire him, but if they were able to get, if the Pistons were able to get, one of these players, what would you be willing to send out for a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr., who is an immediate floor raiser to the nth power just because of his defensive abilities?
Just being brutally honest, I think the only two guys that are off the table for the Pistons in talks for either of these two players is Cade Cunningham and Asar Thompson. I think there's a deal to be made for anybody else on the roster. The Pistons have their draft picks back for the future to include in trades. The only one they don't have is this year's first, which finally conveyed from the Isaiah Stewart trade all those years back. But now they control their 2026 first and down the line. So between having their first round pick capital back and all of the other young pieces that are on this roster outside of Cade Cunningham, outside of Asar Thompson, I think all those guys are in theory on the table. And I think that's completely fair because here are two. The main thing for me with Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren, when I look at how teams have to be built now, and I look at how tough it's going to be for teams as they start inching towards the second apron to be able to retain players, it's really the fault of the CBA is now that teams are putting together organic rosters, they can't afford to pay them without paying hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes to the NBA. So some guys eventually just have to be cut. They have to be moved. They have to be sacrificed. And it's nothing against those two players. But when you look at where Detroit's at, they just inked Cade Cunningham to a max contract last year. Asar Thompson's on a trajectory to get a very significant contract extension when he is up. So you start looking at the numbers and you say, well, Tobias Harris is making $26 million next year. And you have Malik Beasley and Dennis Schroeder, who are both due up and are going to need to make money next year. And then you have Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren, who are both going to be commanding extensions. Now, I don't know where their value is at. But for guys drafted where they're drafted and for the type of minutes that they've played in the NBA and for the production that they've had in the NBA, both those guys are probably trying to make safely upwards of $25 million annually. Is that fair to say? Yes? Okay. I'll take that as a yes. So when I'm building out my roster and I've already got max money committed to Cade down the line, I'm going to have big time money committed to Asar Thompson down the line. Again, when I start putting veterans on the roster, you have Tobias Harris, Dennis Schroeder, Malik Beasley. I just don't know if there's going to be enough money to go around to keep both those guys long term. So I look at someone like Trey Murphy, whose contract is set through the 2028-2029 season, and he tops out at $31 million. And to be quite frank, I think I'd rather have Trey Murphy than either of Jalen Duren or Jaden Ivey. I think that's fair to say. And you'd obviously take Jaren Jackson, a multi-time All-Star, over both of those guys. So there's no one on this roster, and there's no draft capital on this roster that is off the table outside of Cade Cunningham and Asar Thompson for me. I think either of these guys would be really good gets for Detroit. I think they both could make a significant impact and be a major upgrade to the roster. But I just don't know if Detroit is going to make that big move. Now, there was a lot of talk over the last few days. Well, the Magic just jumped Detroit. They got Desmond Bane. So maybe the Pistons will feel some additional pressure now, seeing Orlando and hearing about the offseason ahead, that there's going to be a lot of big moves made. Maybe they'll end up being a part of that. And both these guys would be near the top of my list of guys to go after. So I think both these guys are high-level players. If I had to pick one to go after, which I think is where this conversation is headed, I would pick Trey Murphy.
So that's interesting, Aaron, because I would go the opposite direction. I think for me, a no-brainer would be Triple J. I just look at like where this team is at and what skill sets they need, in my opinion, to take that next step. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. hits every single one of those marks on the head. I think he'd be absolutely perfect to Detroit. The only problem is, I think now that Memphis has traded Desmond Bane, there's absolutely no way you're getting Jaren Jackson Jr. this offseason. It's just not going to happen. Memphis is they're going to pay him. And that sucks for Detroit. But if the consolation prize is one very lightly used Trey Murphy, I can live with that. And I totally agree with you, Aaron, in regards to your assessment of value. Yeah, there's 2 players on this team I wouldn't trade for Trey Murphy. It's Cade Cunningham and Asar Thompson. And I'd be willing to move at least 2 first-round picks. And I know people are going to be scared because they're going to be like, well, we just got out of this first-round pick purgatory this year. Why are we going to go and then trade more draft capital? But let's be honest. We discussed this the day that the Cavs traded for Donovan Mitchell. I said it. I said, if you're a Pistons fan, you need to look at this and understand you're going to need to make a trade like this at some point. It's just got to happen when you look at your roster construction. Like I said earlier, like Ron Holland, where are the additional minutes for him this year in order to grow? Can you justify paying $25 million plus to both Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren, Mike, to your point? I don't know. And if that's the point, and if that's the case, then you are going to have to consolidate. And if you're going to consolidate assets at this point, boy, if you can get back a 24-year-old, small forward, power forward, who's a great three-point shooter, and can play defense, and is really good scoring at the rim, and still looks like he has another level or 2 to hit, that's a pretty good consolidation move because, again, it leaves you in a position where you're still flexible. And I think that that's something that's very important for the Pistons, even as they move forward into this next season. Whether they decide to run it back with this roster or they decide to make a bigger move, they have to maintain some level of flexibility under the CBA and really kind of figure out, I think, what the market for the NBA is going to be. Because, look, if you asked us before the Desmond Bane trade happened, I don't think any of us would say, oh, yeah, it's going to be 4 first-round picks for Desmond Bane. And I mean, look, Cole Anthony and KCP, I mean, let's be honest, that's like salary stuff. But like, that's a lot for Desmond Bane. Desmond Bane's a really, really, really good player, but he's never made an all-NBA team. You know what I mean? Like, he's really good, but he's not that level. So, I don't know. Like, I think you need to be able to figure out exactly not just what the market is right now, but what the market's going to be in a couple of years. And if there is one saving grace to the Pistons potentially making a big move, whether it's for Trey Murphy or Jaren Jackson or Kevin Durant, like we discussed last year, under the new CBA, I think Tom Gores is one of the rare owners in the NBA that will actually eat an insane amount of money for a year or 2 if he truly believes he's going to win a title. Because we just saw him give Monty Williams like $70 million for nothing.
Coach his son in high school.
Yeah, to coach his son in high school to a 15-14 record. Unbelievable. 15-14. They barely got 500, dude. If they lost their last game of the season, he would have finished under 500 coaching a high school basketball team.
He won as many games with the Pistons as he did in high school.
Yes, he ran it back.
One more.
He ran it back. So, like, I think that's kind of how the Pistons need to approach this offseason is if that deal's available, I think you have to take it. And yeah, maybe it costs you 3 first-rounders and it costs you a piece. I think you have to live with that at this point. Because like you said, like Orlando they're making a move and there is space in the East to be filled. There is a bit of a power vacuum. Thibodeau getting fired, Cavs flaming out in the second round again, Boston, like there's a big power vacuum there. And I'm not convinced, even with the Pacers potentially winning the title still, that they are some juggernaut that's, I'm not sure they're like a mid-2000s Pistons where it's like, if you're going to win the East, you got to go through Detroit. I'm not convinced that's even going to be the case next year in regards to Indiana. So
I think the East is really open. It gets more difficult when teams make these types of moves. Like, I don't know if that solves everything for Orlando. It still felt like they really needed a true playmaker, but they were also a much better team when Jalen Suggs was able to play. And he's now healthy, and you get to add one of the better shooters in the NBA in Desmond Bane, who also can do some playmaking things as well. Like, it definitely helps them. And it
can defend, Aaron, and can defend. Yeah. My God, defensively, they took an even bigger step, which is scary.
So, and there will be other teams that get better. There will be teams who are already good that make another move. Like, I still think the Knicks are always a threat to make another move to get better. The Knicks, I saw online stuff about the Knicks maybe being interested in Jaren Jackson Jr. So yeah, I'm not saying the Pistons have to go out and do something this year in the offseason. I mean, I said it when we had one of our first podcasts, or maybe this was one of the podcasts that I did by myself after the season ended. You know, if the Pistons decide to pretty much run it back and make some marginal moves around the roster, I don't think that's the end of the world. But after watching them in the postseason and seeing how close they were to being able to beat New York and then potentially set themselves up for a lengthier run in the playoffs, it almost makes you feel like, man, maybe they should just push in some chips, go get a guy. Like, that is the thing about Trey Murphy for me, is he's going to top out at $31 million, and he's under contract for the next 3 seasons. It's just like it's such a team-friendly deal that if you get to lock him in, it's almost like his contract is what makes him even more valuable than what he is as a player, just because of the price you're going to get him at. I mean, again, you could put him and Jaden Ivey up alongside each other and compare them, and you look at Jaden Ivey's next contract, I think around $25 million a year is a fair ballpark in terms of what Jaden Ivey is going to want in his next contract. And I think Trey Murphy at 28 or 29 or 31 in the next few years is just much more valuable compared to Jaden Ivey. So if this is the offseason, the Pistons push some chips in, looking at the contract of Trey Murphy and looking at the future contract of Jaren Jackson, who his contract will be at, I think the average will be at like $36.5 million because he didn't make the all defensive team this year. So that dropped him from Supermax eligibility. I mean, either of those contracts would be really, really interesting. The only thing about Jaren Jackson is I just envision him and Jalen Duren in a playoff setting and both of them falling out in the same game. And it's not great. And the last thing I'll say on Jaren Jackson is I was underwhelmed with his playoff performance this year. I did not think he played well at all.
I think that's fair, but I think
talent.
But Memphis was just also did anybody feel confident about them going into the playoffs?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
I'm not going to hold that again. I'm not going to hold that against him personally, and I understand why somebody else would.
Well, maybe personally, you're a better guy than me, but I'm going to look at it. I'm going to say it.
You said it, not me, brother. You said it, not me. All right. No, but Aaron, you bring up actually like a fantastic point, and one we should have honestly addressed earlier in regards to Trey Murphy's contract also being a big reason why you'd be comfortable giving up those picks under the new CBA, especially like it provides you with flexibility. Like, you're getting another star, but you still have now an extra $10, $15 million you can play with that wouldn't necessarily be the case for another player of his value if you're signing them as a free agent or whatever. So I think that's an outstanding point you made there. And definitely
that's your veteran backup point guard money. That's your,
that's your Malik Beasley contract right there. That's your Malik Beasley contract.
Legitimate value. And again, like a guy at Trey Murphy's level in today's NBA makes around $40-50 million a year. It's crazy, but that's what it is now. So you're talking about $10, $15, $20 million that you're essentially saving on his contract. And there is substantial value to that because that gets you 1 to 2 contributing players on your roster. That's a huge deal.
Yeah. We're a year away from the first $1 million a game player. Like, it's going to happen next year. So yeah, if you could get somebody at 31 million and he can be a legitimate second option for you offensively, while also being like a good defender and being young and being under contract for years to come, that's something that's really appealing. So
at least one All-Star game in his career. I feel very confident in saying that.
No question. And and I think like we also have to address, like, I understand why people are scared about trading away first round picks, but like this is not the Pistons of the last 15 years. Like, this is not a Blake Griffin situation. You are in a different spot, even than that 2016 team was. You really are. You're way ahead, because for the 2016 team is like, okay, they showed great fight, but now they need to like really figure out like, okay, who's the star here? That's not an issue for this team. You have Cade Cunningham. He is locked in. You are going to be good. Like, that's the best part of it. You are going to be good.
Yeah.
No matter what, you're going to be a good team. So like, trading away first round picks, especially when you have all these young guys still, like it's really not that big of a deal, because these picks are going to be not in the lottery.
Yeah. They're like what, 22, 23 and up. If things go the way they should, if you're building out a competing roster.
And we've seen it a million times. If you lose picks in the mid-20s, you can just trade back into there.
Exactly.
You 100% can. It's not a big deal.
And you're not trading 4 first-round picks for 33-year-old James Harden. You know, you're trading him for a newly minted 25-year-old.
Yes.
Or a newly minted 26-year-old Jaren Jackson. Like,
this is not, we're making
to be entering their prime still.
Yeah, we're not making the big push to hope we win a title and then, oh yeah, we're probably going to lose like a pretty good first-round pick down the line, but hey, we're going to win the title. It's like, no, you're pushing yourself into title contention, but you're also ensuring that your long-term upside is actually raised by making this trade. Like it, yeah. So I think anybody who's scared about trading away first-round picks, I understand you have been burned by the last 15 years of Pistons basketball, but if you're trading for a young player under contract like that, you're going to be just fine. It's really not a big swing.
It's a different era, and you're right about the Cade being the star. You don't have to worry about who's going to be the star, who's the guy that's going to galvanize the rest of the core players. You have that guy already. He's under contract. Somebody said early on in this, I don't remember which beat reporter said that the Pistons fans don't have the stomach for a rebuild, or someone doesn't have a stomach.
James Edwards. That's James Edwards the third. That's a classic.
Well, they also need to get a stomach for a build, because, you know, it takes losing picks. I mean, the Cavs fans went through this and thought trading Colin Sexton was ridiculous. Giving up all that for Donovan Mitchell. There are zero people. There's probably still a few. There are zero people that are thinking, "Man, I wish we would have kept Colin Sexton all those first round picks instead of having Donovan Mitchell." You're going to have this trade's going to come. I don't know if it's for either of these two players, but it's going to be for somebody either this year or next year, and you're going to look at that and be like, okay, they unloaded the clip for X, and that's just going to happen. And I'm still not convinced that that's the move you make this year, to unload that clip. I like Trey Murphy a lot. If he's gettable, then you obviously don't hang up the phone. I just feel like there are other teams that have assets that the Pelicans might feel like they want to have instead. But if he's gettable, that's the kind of guy that slots right in. And just kind of fits. He would fit on a lot of teams, but his salary fits, his age fits, and his skill set fits for sure. So I would be willing to listen more on that than I think Jaren Jackson. I think Jaren Jackson is a better player immediately, but I don't know if Memphis is going to want to trade him. And, I do worry about the playoff performance, the injuries, maybe a little bit. I think Trey Murphy just kind of fits easier to what you want to do, and he would cost less.
Probably. Yeah, I think if Jaren Jackson was eligible for the $345 million a year Supermax and he was making $70 million a year, Memphis would probably feel more inclined to move on from him. But now that he's going to top out at $37 million, or that's going to be the average of the deal, it just, at his age, it really doesn't make sense for them to let him walk unless they're like, we need to collect as many first-round picks as possible because we just want to hard relaunch this. I just don't understand why they'd let him walk at 25 years old when he's a multi-time All-Star, one of the best defenders in the league, and he's making pennies compared to other guys at his level of play.
I also want to quickly say, like, I think a perfectly legitimate strategy for the Pistons is to not make a big move this offseason and run it back and see what's available at the trade deadline. Like, I think that's also a perfectly reasonable, legitimate strategy by this front office. There are going to be guys available. And I think especially when you look at the East, there's so many moving parts. I do think there's going to be like teams that are expecting themselves to be somewhere that they're not, or teams that, you know, end up have expectations and just don't live up to them. I think there's going to be even more players available at the deadline. And frankly, you know, unless he gets moved before then, it's not like the Pelicans are not going to be trying to acquire more assets and putting Trey Murphy on the table. Like, that's still going to be there. So I think it's totally reasonable to want to wait for a few months as well and just kind of see exactly where you're at before you make that big swing. Because we've seen teams in the past, you know, they have a little bit of success. They make a big trade because they're like, the Atlanta Hawks are a great example of this, you know, the DeJounte Murray trade, because they thought they were somewhere that they weren't. And that came back to really bite them in the butt in the end, where, you know, then they, you know, you're trading him as almost like a negative asset. So you don't want to get trapped in that place either. So yeah, I'm totally would be cool with them waiting a little bit too.
The last thing I'll say on this is, and I can understand if you're on the side of, I just don't think it makes sense to move first round picks. Look at what it's done in the past. I get it. But my thought proposition for you at the end of this, when the show is over, is really sit down and think about the core of this roster and ask yourself, if this core develops the way it should, is it good enough to win a championship? Are the guys that they have right now, the core guys that they have, the pieces needed to win a championship? And if you sit there and you really think they are, fine. But I'm on the side of, there will have to be one significant addition to this team. And so that's why I feel like if they do decide to move first, so they do decide to trade one or two of these young guys to go out and make that splash move, I'm going to be saying that was the right decision.
You can make this type of thing. I think a great example of like why you do this trade and how it can work for you, not just in the short term, but the long term. I think like the OKC Paul George trade, you know, like they traded young, really good players to Indiana. They traded multiple first round picks to Indiana, but they did it for a guy who was still in his prime. And when that team kind of fell apart, they were able to move on from Paul George and acquire, let me look, SGA for him. So like making a trade, yes, it's scary, but if you're doing it for somebody that's still going to be in their prime and still going to be a really attractive trade asset, when that, you know, if it doesn't work out, it's really not that big of a risk. Like you can get those firsts back, and frankly, you could probably get a player back too. So I don't think it's nearly as big of a risk as some people would think it is when they look at it on paper. And again, Aaron, like when you bring the contracts into it, even more so.
So we've kind of alluded to it a little bit, but with the Desmond Bane trade, has that increased your has that increased the pressure that you feel that the Pistons should make a move? Yes or no?
I mean, yes, from the standpoint of, I don't think the East is just going to sit here and let the Pistons take a step forward next year. Like, I think the Pistons are going to have to get better if they want to stay in the section of the conference that is better than a play-in team. I still think they're going to have, and even if they were, good enough to win the play-in, like, I still think the roster is going to have to get better. And you could say that that is already on the roster because they're going to get Jaden Ivey back. But I still look at the Simone Fontecchio minutes from last year, and I think, man, as much as I liked him in his first half season with the team, he just was not good enough this past season, and the Pistons have to improve there. What's going to happen with the 3 veterans on the roster? Dennis Schroeder, Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr. All of them are unrestricted free agents. Do they take that cap space and use it to get a maybe not Trey Murphy level player, but someone a little bit below that? How do they fill out those roster spots? Point being, other teams in the East are going to get better. Boston is not just going to be a disaster next year. They still have good players without Jason Tatum, who, he could be back towards the end of next season. There will be good teams in the East. I'm sure Philadelphia doesn't want to just completely rebuild. They have Tyrese Maxey. They've committed the long-term money to Joel Embiid. I know there's been some trade stuff with maybe they move off of Paul George. They're still going to want to be a good team in the East. Orlando's going to be better next year. I think Toronto's going to be better next year. They added Brandon Ingram. They're going to get him to finally play next season. Masai Ujiri is always trying to improve that roster. The East is not just going to sit and say, okay, the Pistons roster is good enough to be a top 4 seed now in the East this year. All these teams are going to be getting better. I think the Pistons have to try to do the same in some capacity.
Yeah, there's blood in the water. The Sharks are going to come. It doesn't matter if you're closer to the ship first. Like, everybody's going to come and everybody's going to be fighting for the meat. And, Aaron,
it's just like if you're an NBA GM, if you're an Eastern Conference GM and you watch these playoffs and you saw Indiana get to the finals, how are you not sitting there saying, okay, we've got to push the chips in here.
Exactly.
We can win this conference, especially now with Jason Tatum going down and Boston, even if they're a playoff level team next year, they're not the clear-cut favorites. They're not the powerhouse in the East. It's open for the taking. How are you not sitting here saying, all right, let's see what we can do asset-wise. Let's try to make a couple big moves and let's see what we can do next year.
Yeah.
How are you not?
Just because there's a great white doesn't mean everybody else ain't going to join in. So, like, I think for me, no, this doesn't change anything. I thought before the Desmond Bane trade, before the season even ended, I thought the Pistons are going to have to make a trade in order to improve this offseason. It just has to happen. That is the natural progression of your team. And I'm not looking at anybody else in the East to determine how I'm going to build my roster. I think that's what bad GMs do. They look at what other people are doing and they try and, keep up with the Joneses. That's how you go broke. You have to stay on your path, what works for you, and stay true to that process. Because, look, that's what the Pistons did this year, right? They didn't make a huge swing. They didn't, go out there and throw a whole bunch of money around. No, they made small to medium-sized improvements on their roster, and it elevated their team way more than even they thought it would. So, no, I don't think a Desmond Bane trade changes anything for you in how you're approaching this offseason, how you're approaching the next few years. You got a good thing going, stick with it. Don't screw it up because somebody else made a move. That's how you screw yourself over. Panic trades kill GMs. Period.
And I think there's something to be said about continuity too. Boston had pressure externally to break up Brown and Tatum. They didn't. The Cavs had pressure to break up their core. They didn't yet. So there is something to continuity as well. The Pacers could fall into that too. They made a move for Pascal Siakam. Was that 2 off seasons ago? Or was that last?
No,
was that
last
year?
Last trade deadline,
last year.
which is crazy.
They were what?
No.
2 games under?
No, 2 years ago. Sorry, 2 years ago at the trade deadline.
Deadlines ago.
Yeah, two trade deadlines ago.
Yeah, it was 2 deadlines ago. So
can I make a point about that real quick? I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mike, but
no, it's fine.
Pascal Siakam is, I would say, 2 years ago, even now, probably in line with the level of player of Trey Murphy and Jaren Jackson, maybe closer to Jaren Jackson, Trey Murphy, maybe a little bit below, whatever. Point being, not like a star guy, and look at how much better he made Indiana. That's just looking at that as a case study. That's just even more reason. If a guy of that caliber is available, go do it. Go do it.
He's such a good fit. Maybe he's not a better player in a vacuum than Jaren Jackson. I think what Jaren Jackson provides in a vacuum is probably better in terms of defense, like defensive capabilities and being a viable 3-point shooter. But I think his fit on Indiana makes him look and feel a lot better, and that's paid immediate dividends. Were in the conference finals the last 2 years, and they're in the NBA finals this year. And Trey Murphy, I think, does feel like a Pascal type player in that he could be such a good fit in Detroit that it looks a lot better than anything that you saw in New Orleans, just because the Pelicans have been an abject disaster for X amount of years in a row. So yes, I think I would agree with you on that point.
You can be the most important scorer on a team and not be the guy. Like, that's how I think of like Pascal Siakam. Is like he's their most important scorer. Yeah, Jalen Williams, like not the guy. I mean, I wouldn't say this for Chris Middleton because Giannis was their most important scorer too, but like Chris Middleton, another guy, like they can't win a title without his scoring, period. Like they were not winning a title without Chris Middleton or somebody of his caliber. And I think Trey Murphy, if you're looking at like why you make a trade for somebody like him, it's because you're looking at second bananas like that. Guys who don't necessarily stand out, guys who you wouldn't want to be the alpha dog on any team. But if they're your second scorer, if they're, but the guy that just, you need a bucket and they're honing in on Cade Cunningham, who can go get you a bucket? Pascal Siakam can get you a bucket. Trey Murphy can get you a bucket. Chris Middleton can get you a bucket. You know what I mean? Like Kristaps Porzingis, could get you a bucket. Like that's another dude. If you're the Wizards and Kristaps is your best player, you're screwed. If you're the Celtics and he's your third best player, congratulations. You are one of the best title teams of the last 20 years. Yeah, you're absolutely unstoppable. So I think that is that's like kind of the way that you look at something like that, where it's like, yeah, maybe he's not the all NBA big sexy name, but like you don't need that necessarily as long as he fits the role that you need him to fit on your team to a T. And based on what we're saying here, I think Trey Murphy definitely fits that. So,
yeah. And I'll make one more point before we wrap, because we've been able to turn 3 topics in almost 1 hour, which is really impressive, guys. Even if the Pistons don't make a trade, we've talked about the deadline being another opportunity. The NBA moves so fast, who knows who's going to be available at the deadline. And, it could be a sign of what they do with Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren extension-wise. If they provide them extensions, and depending on what those numbers are, could be tradable contracts. If they don't extend them, which they don't have to, we've talked a lot about what is their number, 20 million, 25. They don't have to extend them at all. Those then become tradable players, as the season gets closer and closer. It's what happened with Colin Sexton as well. He didn't get his contract extension. The Utah Jazz were willing to pay it. That was part of the stipulation. The Cavs didn't feel comfortable doing it. The Pistons may not feel comfortable giving Jaden Ivey $25 million a year. I don't know if I feel comfortable doing that based on what we've seen. So could be indicative of what they're going to do if they don't give those guys extensions. They will have the opportunity. Some other team that is in more of a rebuilding mode may feel more comfortable paying Jaden Ivey and letting him grow in a different setting. So just because they don't make a trade over the summer, when everybody, ESPN's hyping up, The Athletic is hyping up that this is going to be the most movement we've seen in such a long time, and whatnot, just because the Pistons maybe hang idle doesn't mean that they're not willing and ready to deal weeks into the season.
100%. They don't have to make the move right now, but they can make the move at the deadline, like we've talked about. Like, just wait till the right guys available. If Trey Murphy, if Jaren Jackson's available now, someone else could become available. Someone else could become available at the trade deadline. They could wait until next offseason and see what the second apron does to some of these other teams that maybe haven't been impacted yet. There will be a move to be made for Detroit.
Maybe they should do it sooner, before the Lakers are no longer run like a mom and pop and start to just consume everybody. in free agency at
The Lakers are no
deadline.
longer run like a mom and pop, yet they traded for Luka Doncic and still have LeBron James.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. You ever watch Futurama? Like, like no?
No.
What? No? Oh yeah. Yes.
Oh man, like the mom who like owns the mom's robot company, Mike.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Where it's like, oh dearie, like I run this multi-trillion-dollar company. Like that's the Lakers, the little mom and pop shop. Right by, and if you open up the door in the back, there's just a sweatshop 3 miles deep with like little Chinese kids just tying knots as well as their little fingers can handle. So
I mean, that's the same ownership group that owns the Dodgers. If that's any indication, I know that Major League Baseball's salary cap is non-existent really, and that's not going to happen in the NBA. You're not going to have Dodger level spending, but this is the same ownership group, so maybe they should go and make a move.
Well, I guess
later.
I think what Mike is trying to say is, folks, if you have any relatives, friends that are in prison, give them a call right now.
Is that what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that's what Mike's saying, and make it a long conversation because Tom Gores needs every single cent he can get if the Pistons are going to win a title.
Aaron, did you enjoy being credentialed last season? You should probably make like a Sarah McLachlan-esque outro video of all your finest moments.
I'm gonna have to issue a notes app apology on behalf of Jasper now.
Sorry. This is the only way I'm getting invited on the Ball podcast. I got to do it.
Success.
They did a what was it? They did a Joe Dumars retrospective, and I was watching, and I was just like losing my mind because there were so many details they skipped over. They didn't even get to the John Kuster practice walkout. It doesn't matter. I need to correct some records on this.
So this is your audition to get on a different podcast?
Yeah, I'm going to go on. Yeah, and I'm going to call in from...
really falling apart for Jasper the last few minutes.
Jeez.
I'm feeling fine. Whatever. Could be worse. I could have slept with my brother's wife, so...
Okay. That's a great way to end that. Oh, man. We haven't had a funny ending like that in a while. I feel like it's been all business for the first 1 hour, 1 minute, and 18 seconds, and then Jasper just took us right off the rails. He's like, "I'm bored." Guys, anything else before we wrap up this edition of the Jasper? You stay muted.
Yeah, Jasper.
Jasper's keep it muted.
I'm worried this might be our last podcast now. Like the KBB might show up in the middle of the night and we might just all disappear at this point.
Well, so they'll never find you in the cedar closet.
True. I can lock the door.
Aaron's in the Unabomber's cabin right now as we speak, writing his manifesto.
All right, I don't have the option to just automatically mute Jasper. I was gonna do that, but I can't. Let's just wrap, Mike. I want to make sure we wrap before this show self implodes.
Okay, well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast. I'd like to thank our sponsor, which is nobody other than the Palace of Pistons.
Say that way now.
So yeah, it's going to say that way now. Thank you for all of the sponsors that did sponsor us. You are in a very exclusive group because we're never going to have one after this. But make sure that you are subscribed to us on Substack, wherever you get your podcast, whether that be YouTube or any podcast app. The link will be in the show notes or in the description. We would really appreciate you subscribing to our Substack. Really, really appreciate it. I promise we'll have written content. I swear. It will be happening. We're going to have to now with the draft a week away. So, and you will get that directly into your inbox. So don't have to go and search for it, find it. It will be directly in your email inbox as soon as we post it, along with this podcast. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Palace Pistons, on X/Twitter, Palace Pistons, on Instagram or on Facebook. We do still post there as well. So make sure that you are following along as we get set to probably start the off season with it could be a few hours. By the time you're listening to this, the off season may already be here. With the potential final game of the NBA Finals happening tonight as we get set to record this. For my co-hosts, Jasper Apollonia, who's now blacklisted, Jaren Johnson, who is not blacklisted. We're going to keep him around, and Mike Anguilano. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast, part of the Believe Network, and we will see you all next time.